Welcome to Psyber Conversations, the show where it's okay to agree to disagree. My name's Josh. I'm joined today by Bob, Darren, Heather, Matthew, and Michael. And today we're talking about 2019's Avengers Endgame. This was a huge movie that I was looking forward to for years before it came out because they announced it 3 or 4 years ahead of time, I think. I was watching anytime there was any hint of what was coming out, Kevin Feige would come on board and talk about it. So I was following all that very closely because, as I've said, that's my life. I have nothing else.
Well, I think everybody was doing that. Is every time there was a nugget thrown down. I mean, even this week.
Yeah, not me. Sorry, but
San Diego.
I enjoyed it, but no, not me.
Well, no, but
the comic book fans.
diehards. Yeah, for us diehards.
Yes.
I mean, just like San Diego Comic-Con this week, everybody's doing breakdowns of like the Hall H Marvel panel and Doomsday, and then Deadpool showed up and that type of thing. So I think that that's the way.
His name was Gene Pool, actually. Gene Pool.
Gene Pool.
Yeah, he was wearing denim. So.
Oh, is that what it was?
I will say that this movie, when it came out, I got to be the cool dad. Not that I'm the only one who's ever done this, I'm sure, but the day that tickets came on sale, I was online ahead of time, like 5 minutes beforehand, getting ready to click on what I needed to, and it came out on a Thursday, so I took my daughter out of school because she was in high school at the time. I took her out of school, and we had the whole day together, and then saw the movie at night for the first time in a 4DX theater, which was kind of cool. I'm not that big on the 4DX thing, but yeah, but it was cool. I made a letter with a SHIELD logo on it and with the red word classified going across it like as a watermark. And it said, my daughter's name, SHIELD Agent Level 3, and then my name, SHIELD Agent Level 7, because of course. And then it was like, your presence is requested and required at, and I did an escape room with her that was superhero themed. And then we went to this place in New York called Max Brenner's Chocolate Bar. We had a chocolate pizza, and that's still one of the highlights of my life.
Well,
the real question is, does she ever mention it? Does she ever say, "Hey, Dad, remember that time you took me out of school? We saw Endgame."
After she was a teenager at the time. I don't know if her memory goes back that far.
Let me start with kind of a question. Is so Josh just kind of answered that, so we don't need to go with him, but we'll start with Michael. Is when you think about Avengers Endgame and like what happened back then, what do you think of first? Michael, why don't you start?
I think of I don't know, just as a kid, it was something that we were looking forward to, of just the finale of this overall storyline with the Avengers. But the one thing that I take away from it when it came out, like, because it was 7 years ago, so I was 20, almost 21. It was something that, I don't know. Seeing people run to the theater at the midnight release was something that I've never seen before in my entire life. So I thought that was something truly special because everyone wanted to get a good seat for that movie, and it was just line out the door and it was like every theater in the movie theater was showing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't you wish that we could get like a time machine so that he could see Bob, because you're his dad, and me and Darren going to the cinema dome and doing exactly the same thing?
Yeah, I wish we had a quantum realm. I'd do it right now.
How could we possibly do a time machine, Josh? How?
Heather, what did you think when you think about Avengers Endgame? I know you've rewatched it, but what does it stir up for you?
I also went like fairly early on. It was a very exciting, pop culture thing going on. I did see it in theaters and all that stuff, and so there was a lot of excitement around that, and yeah, the culmination of the story arc, like Michael was saying, like wanting to know, okay, how does this end? Because the giant cliffhanger that Infinity War did. So. All the other movies aside, there's got to be an ending to that particular story arc. So yeah, it was exciting, and yeah, I got caught up in the pop culture.
Nice, Darren.
2019, I wasn't doing a lot of going to the theater, so I didn't have a lot of active anticipation for this movie and going to the theater and sitting down. But I do remember when I did see it for the first time, just losing my mind when Captain America picks up the hammer. I was like, what? Yeah, I love that part. I just that to me is that's a visceral memory for me. I was like, that finally, yay, that's some good payoff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when you find out what it feels like to get smothered by a crowd that all stand up at the same time, and you weren't expecting it.
Yeah. Matthew, what about you?
Yeah, I guess at the time I was really excited. It was 7 years ago now, so a little hazy with the memory, but I think it was an exciting time, and everybody knew it was the finale of at least what we expected from the MCU at the time. We knew the second Spider-Man movie was coming out after this, kind of to wrap it up. But I also, like Heather, I was curious where they were going to take the story. I'm like, how do they even resolve this? But I was also curious, I'm like, where are they going to take the MCU after this as a whole? I think that was the big question in my mind, because you knew this was going to be the end, and that was kind of what was going through my mind. But I was very excited. Again, much like the first Avengers, I think this was one of those ones. Obviously, I was very excited for Infinity War, but you could definitely tell the energy around this movie was very tangible, much like how, Dad, if you recall, when we went and saw Spider-Man 1 back in 2002, well, we were all excited. You'd never seen a movie like that before.
Yeah.
Granted, we had a lot of superhero movies up until this point, but this one was definitely, I think, very special for a lot of people. And I think there was a lot of expectation around this movie and hoping that they could deliver, and they did. I think they ended everything very, very well. So that's kind of how I was feeling at the time.
Yeah, I think
we kind of
that.
knew. Sorry.
Go ahead, Josh.
Well, we kind of knew that it had to be huge, because I still remember everyone going crazy just trying to figure out what the movie was going to be called. Because when they first announced it, it was going to be Infinity War Part 1 and Infinity War Part 2. And then they said, no, we're not going to do that, but we're not telling you what the name is. And of course, people were saying, they had all sorts of names. Endgame was one of them, and I can't remember the others, but there was a lot of different ideas for what they were going to do. I thought for a while they were trolling everyone and they were just going to call it Infinity War Part 2.
Well, didn't they say that they were like, this word was used in a previous film, which was...
Yeah, they said something like that.
In Infinity War and Age of Ultron, because Tony Stark says it in Age of Ultron, where he's like, we're in the Endgame, or he says that up there's the Endgame. It's Doctor Strange that says we're in the Endgame now in Infinity War. But I remember it was the Super Bowl trailer, because that was the first thing we ever saw, and that was where the title was released, and everyone was like up in arms because they were like, really?
Yeah, and then we couldn't wait for the trailer, and the trailer finally came out. The first time I saw the trailer was not the actual trailer. Someone said they got an image from the trailer, and it was actually a trailer, a truck trailer that said Avengers Endgame on it. And they said, this is the first Endgame trailer.
You didn't get rickrolled with a trailer?
That kind of is like being rickrolled.
That totally is. So we come into the movie, and it sets up an immediate rematch with Thanos right away, because it's like right at, what was it, 2 weeks? Like it's only been like a week or two. 3 weeks.
It was 23 days.
23 days.
Yeah, 23 days.
Yeah, 23 days. So then the Avengers immediately find him, unalive him, and then the story jumps 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of questions I wanted to throw out there, and we'll start with Michael again on this one. Is how did you feel about, just a couple of things to think about. Was killing Thanos early a good thing, a bad thing? Was the 5-year jump a big deal? I know it's kind of become a big deal since then, because some people are like, oh, the timeline's kind of skewed, and I don't want to necessarily jump into that. Did you feel like the movie showed enough of how the world changed since the blip? Michael, why don't you kind of jump in with that?
I mean, watching it, so the movie starts with like Hawkeye and his family, just shows that, because it's trying to explain where he was.
Right.
And then it does the title, and then I don't see that as the opening of the film. What I see as the opening of the film is the fact that they go and attack Thanos, because that, I think, set up the theme of the film, which was these characters are now going to risk it all and they don't care. Like, some of their morals, I think, dropped in that scene, especially Thor. And you could see Captain America had that look on his face that he was like, I'm not the same person I was literally 2 weeks ago.
Well, he swore. The same guy who said language.
Yeah.
And let's go get this son of a bitch.
So they were all different at that point. So when it jumped to the 5 years thing, that's where I was like, okay, this is the opening scene for this film. This is where it's taking us. The 5-year jump didn't. I thought that was really cool, because it really showed, it helps us understand how broken down the characters are at this point and how they feel like they're defeated and there's no hope to bring anyone back, And so it was, I like how dark it set the tone for the film. So I think, and then showing, Thor unaliving Thanos, that Thanos, I didn't think that was too early because that Thanos was Infinity War Thanos. Then the Thanos we get later in the movie, that's Endgame Thanos. They're totally different. Even though it's the same person, it's two different timelines. It's two different Thanoses. Like one is younger than the other, if you look at it that way.
9 years younger. Yeah.
Yeah. Matthew, what do you think?
I think I was shocked the first time I saw it. I remember being like, what the heck? Like, Thanos is the villain. Like, you going to kill him this early? And I guess I didn't realize at the time until I get to the scene where they do the time heist. Like, oh, okay, that's how they're going to do it. But initially I was like, whoa, that's kind of subverting expectations. I do think they spend a lot of time without Thanos in the movie. And I don't know if that, brings it down in quality, but it's kind of moody. It's kind of grim. You're seeing the aftermath, which is great. Sometimes I feel like it's a bit stretched out, and I feel
that's
like that.
Actually,
go ahead.
I just find that interesting because I actually feel the opposite way, but we'll get to that. You go first.
I think it just kind of bogs down. Like, you went from this high-paced action story, and of course you want your heroes to resolve their feelings, but you're also cramming in a 5-year time jump. And I don't know. It just, without Thanos being the centerpiece of this movie, that's why I like Infinity War better. And I said that in that episode, is he made the movie more interesting. And without it, we've already seen these characters a dozen different times at this point, and seeing them downtrodden doesn't give everybody the warm and fuzzies. I know they shouldn't be like positive, but like, I don't know. It was an interesting narrative choice for the film.
To
for
slow
me,
it down. Heather, is that what you're saying?
To slow it down, because then you end up with a 3-hour runtime, and it's like, did we need 3 hours?
Well,
we needed 3 hours for Infinity War, but we didn't get that. We got 2.5.
You could look at Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows and how the first half was super slow, and then the second half is just all battle. So this one's reverse to that. You know
right?
What I mean?
But
like I said in last episode, it's kind of like Kill Bill. The first half is very, very exciting, lots of action, and the second half is much more reflective and introspective.
Does that make for a compelling narrative? I don't know. From a storytelling perspective, I don't know that
It depends on who you ask.
Yeah. But yeah, it's subjective.
So for me, going in without any specific expectations of where the story was going, to me, it didn't feel out of place. It's like, okay, they took care of Thanos. Now, how are they going to fix what happened? And so I was waiting to see how they fix it. And like, you see 5 years go by, it's like, well, they haven't fixed it in 5 years. So they must still be working on it. So I was actually more invested in finding out how they were fixing the snap to begin with than I was worried about, who's the villain right now. So I think, it did land okay for me, and I didn't feel like I was missing Thanos through that, because I was looking for them to problem solve at that point.
Yeah. Darren?
I thought the fact that they chased after Thanos after the snap and they resolved what happened with the stones in the original timeline, that was super smart from a storytelling standpoint, because if it was unresolved as to where the stones went and what became of them, if that was an unknown thing, then time travel would never have been on the table ever, because they would have just followed the path to where the stones went, and the whole movie would have been about resolving that. But the fact
it would
that
have been another hunt for all the stones.
Yeah, it would have been another hunt. So they got that completely out of the way, so that not only could you have that my gosh, now there's no way to undo this, you could have that super low to start with, which is fantastic, and you also build the tension up with the desperation to develop time travel and to take that risk. It was fantastic from a storytelling. And they get to double dip action, the conflict with Thanos. They get 2 showdowns with Thanos in 2 different movies. It was awesome. So
yeah,
smartest thing they could have done.
Let me ask this in reference to Avengers Doomsday, coming this December to a theater near you, should Avengers Doomsday then begin, like, where do you think it's going to begin? Is it the heroes already losing? Are they going to be in the disarray? Do they need to rebuild? How do you think that should kick off? And you don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but just kind of how you think that you're going to see that movie opening with Doomsday.
I mean, I don't see it after the blip. After the events of Endgame, things are going to get somewhat back to normal. I mean, we see that in the movies that come after. But one thing I didn't get to say, and I was talking to Matthew about this, is that I felt the opposite, because this is kind of a hot take among comic book fans, certainly among Darren, because he wants you said last week you want the action. You didn't like, what was it, Captain Marvel? You didn't like how it was slow for a while. I kind of wanted to see more of that 5-year gap. I think that most Avengers fans would probably just want to go straight to the action. So maybe I'm different in that way, but I was really interested in that world that they were living in where they had lost and half of all life is gone. I found that scene with Cap and Nat talking about how they were trying to get a life. I thought that was more compelling than like a lot of the other scenes in the movie. So
well,
I actually wouldn't have.
I think they fleshed that out, obviously, in some of the other shows and that type
they
of thing.
Definitely
and
did,
that's
but
the next
I would be
topic
okay.
I wanted to get into.
Okay, I didn't mean to jump the gun, but I definitely would have been okay with a series that took place during the blip with minimal superheroes. Like, they would be there, but there wouldn't be as much conflict. It would mostly be, I know everyone hates this word, but a drama-based show about life.
Not even that there's less conflict. I would imagine there's less confidence.
Yeah.
And
it would be a very gloomy show.
Yeah.
And for that, it would have that against it. But I think it was a really interesting thing because everyone leading up to them, well, I can't speak for everyone, but I thought that they were going to be able to deal with it so that the snap didn't happen in the first place, or that they were able to bring everyone back to the instant that they were snapped so that they came back and there was no time lapse. And instead, we got a 5-year gap where people were devastated and had to move on.
And they didn't undo the 5-year gap by snap.
Yeah.
Well, I think the complexity of undoing the 5-year gap would have been different. And that the next topic I kind of wanted to bring up was the Avengers, and just kind of during this time. So each Avenger, kind of handled their loss a little bit different. You got Steve, right? He's leading support group. Natasha, just kind of throws herself into work, and she's constantly like talking to Captain Marvel and everything else.
All of them.
Tony's just off with his family. Thor is just a complete like drunk bro Thor, I think is what they called him.
That was a horrible decision for
that was a really bad
That was
decision.
so
stupid. It made no sense for Thor's character.
I wasn't very happy with that or Smart Hulk.
I disagree that it was against his character. I think that's definitely something he has the capacity to do because he hasn't.
They might have left
shown
him in
to be
it
very
too long,
mature.
Yeah, but
in general.
So. Yeah, but he went hard. Like that's the thing. He turned into a joke,
Yeah, and you could have had like, okay, he was down and out, he was a drunk, whatever, he was, really depressed. But they latched onto that for most of the movie.
That's true. They did put a big magnifying glass on that, yeah.
Yeah, and not only that, there are great ways to deal with that PTSD and that grief that he's going through and the guilt he has for failing to stop Thanos. Those are all things that he's showing, and that's valid. But they turned him, instead of focusing on that and making that his story, instead they made him a joke, like a series of fat jokes and how it just went on and on and on.
Well, Hawkeye lost hard, and he kind of went in the opposite direction. He went.
See, that's what I thought Thor should have also gone through with everything that Thor's been through for because he's been alive for 1,500 years, is what he said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't he be more angry and more dangerous? Like someone who wants to fall into alcoholism, wouldn't that go to I don't know, maybe Tony or even just Bruce Banner, and then he loses control as the Hulk?
Yeah.
Even though this hadn't Smart Hulk.
Even though this hadn't
Professor
happened
Hulk.
yet, Andrew Garfield, what he talks about after the loss of Gwen Stacy, in Spider-Man No Way Home, how he says he started, he stopped pulling his punches.
Yeah.
I think that's more of what Thor might have done. So
and
I was okay with it until they started just making him the butt of jokes instead of focusing on what they should have focused on.
Yeah, I think it's okay to show that he took it in the depressed manner and that he just really went down, mental health rabbit hole. But yeah, when it became a joke, it was.
Well, they had to show, from a story standpoint, they had to show everybody reacting differently, and there's no guarantee that everyone in that group would react absolutely differently. Some of them
You
And
had
I
to have the
agree.
vengeance one. You had to have the hopeless one. You had to have the I'm ignoring everything and just going to try and pretend like everything's good. So yeah, you had some key tropes that you had to hit with that.
I agree that everyone should have dealt with trauma their different ways. There's 6 different people, 7 different people, and each one is going to deal with grief in their own way, including Thor. But turning him into a joke is kind of like making light of the fact that he's suffering from this. At least to a degree.
I was thinking with Hulk too, it was interesting because Bruce, his healing journey, it wasn't even so much of a healing journey. It was just more, he was focused on combining Hulk. I think he was more of a reinventing himself. Yeah. And that was his healing process.
That was also, I wasn't that big on that either.
So,
see, I actually thought that was interesting. I thought like, wow, he's brought the two pieces of himself together as a result of this. I mean, I thought that was one of the more positive reactions.
That was very much a comic book
in all the trauma
interpretation.
Yeah. I think my biggest problem was what I talked about last week, which was it felt like it was unresolved. Hulk wouldn't come out because he was afraid or embarrassed that he lost to Thanos or whatever it was. And they didn't have some kind of Michael Brady moment where I don't know how they would have done it, where Banner talks to Hulk and be like, chin up, big guy.
Well, and I think this goes back to the, the 5-year gap thing. If we had gotten some glimpses into how these changes, how this affected each Avenger over the course of 5 years, not just like, let's, go from point A to point B without seeing what the journey was, might have added to it. But I know this, it was a long story to begin with. So
it made for a lot more exposition rather than showing what happened. And, they had to shorten things somewhere. It was already a 2-hour and 30-minute movie easily. So
isn't it 3 hours?
3 hours and 2 minutes.
Okay.
But they leave it to imagination in terms of like, okay, what was that struggle like between Bruce and Hulk, and how did he manage to reconcile the two sides, within himself, like you just, jumped from one to the other. So, but yeah, I mean, again, like Josh, like you were saying, if there had been some sort of series that maybe gave you some glimpse into the 5-year gap or whatever else it might be, whether it's the 5-year gap for the Avengers who survived the snap, or the 5-year gap for what was going on with these other people that were just, in the ether somewhere.
Yeah, I think that, and the one storyline that they focused on is Tony Stark's, happy ending. He got Pepper, they have a family, he's living his dream over there and that type of thing. And then he gets pulled back into it. And to me, it's the one thing that he's the one
to
character.
Get out, they pull me back in.
And then you've got, obviously, with Doomsday coming up, you got Robert Downey Jr. back as Doomsday. I'm sure they're going to tie it to the whole Tony Stark thing and that type of thing.
There are a number of ways they can that are comic accurate.
Right. But I didn't know if anybody wanted to chime in specifically on like Tony Stark and his sort of happy ending despite the blip and the 5 years and the struggles of the Earth. He's over there, living his dream, and then how that's gonna impact going forward, even though he was Tony Stark and now he's Victor Von Doom. But I didn't know, Matthew or Michael, if you wanted to jump in on any of that.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Or you want to jump in first, Aaron? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, when time travel was not a possibility, then Tony's position of, I'm going to move forward and I'm going to raise my family, I'm going to focus on that. That was a valid position, or that was a morally acceptable position to take. But the moment time travel became a real option for him to switch gears and say, okay, I get that I have a responsibility here. Now that it's even possible to do something about it, to bring people back, he has to do that. If it's a possibility, then he has to take it. If he didn't, that would be a very, very extremely selfish thing for him to do. So he kind of got his cake and eat it too. He got his cake and ate it too in this movie. So,
to a degree,
aside from dying, up until that point, he pretty much got both everybody back and he kept his family, which is what he was going for. So that's,
he largely was able to move on better than the other Avengers, but he did hold on to one thing that not all the Avengers did. He held on to his anger, and he even said that, like, that anger is corrosive or holding a grudge. He held a grudge against Steve for not being on Titan, even though, logically Steve couldn't have been there, but that's not how anger works, and that's the one thing that Robert Downey Jr. did not, or I should say Tony Stark didn't move forward. He was holding on to his anger for Cap.
Yeah. Matthew, did you want to jump in?
Please do. I feel like I'm talking too much.
You're good. No, Tony again.
You are.
I think Tony had the most right response after he realized he couldn't resolve it. And I think that's a perfectly human reaction. I think his anger with Steve is rational, right? Steve caused the rift in Civil War, which I don't think that can be disputed.
Well, I still don't agree with that, but that's okay.
But he's the one that refused the Accord, so it is. That's factual, right? He refused the Accord, so he caused the rift because he wanted to be...
At the very least, from Tony's point of view.
Sure. And so
caused the rift.
If he's angry, that's understandable. But I think Tony being pulled back in also made sense for his character. Agree to disagree. I think Tony being pulled back in made sense for the character because, he had built the bond with Peter, and Tony never lets anything go unfinished. And once he realized that he could, even though it was kind of convenient, like he figured out time travel in 20 seconds. I know it's for the purpose of pacing, but it was just a little too convenient. I think it made sense that he wanted to help everybody again, despite having built up the life that he ultimately wanted, which was peaceful, and he didn't have to worry about anything like defending anyone anymore. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
I thought it was like we talked about it during our Ant-Man and the Wasp podcast, the whole quantum realm and how important that was. And I think, I don't know if it was necessarily quick. It was a bunch of data that Scott probably gave him that they already had about the quantum realm and that type of thing. So he's running models. But I agree with you guys for Tony, it did become more than just, oh, I just figured out time travel. Ooh, like I'm awesome. He actually, normally when he's doing stuff in previous Iron Man movies and all the times, it's just like just wanting to be on top and always wanted to beat the next challenge. And this one, it actually, it was a challenge, obviously, to figure out time travel, but it was also, it needed to be done because, like you guys said, is Tony was seeing, the bigger picture, and he knew that he needed to bring everybody back. So I think, he was starting, even at that point, he's starting to demonstrate his selflessness rather than selfishness that we'd all come to agree with him, or not agree with, but see him.
Let me disagree. Let me just disagree just a little bit on that. I think Tony was being Tony in solving time travel. I think his curiosity got the best of him. He was in his zone. He was doing what Tony does, is to solve stuff. And you could see it on his face the moment that model resolved and it worked. He kind of sat back and kind of had this look of, crap, now I have to use this.
I think he said shit.
No.
We can say shit on this show.
Can we? Okay.
Yeah,
I think
to me that showed some of his evolution, that he wasn't so rash to just jump to it. He actually had to stop and think about it because now he had stuff to lose. Like he had a life to lose. And so I think, that did give him a very brief sense of pause, but, doing the right thing and the scientific curiosity, I think, won out in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Michael, did you want to jump in on that at all?
The whole him figuring out time travel so fast. Yes, for pacing, it was a little quick, but it also, if you think about it, his dad did work with Hank Pym for however long. I mean, wouldn't his dad have maybe introduced him to certain things that Hank Pym invented where else did Tony Stark learn to get into the whole technology and business side of it, if not it was motivation from his dad, and so maybe that played into it. They just didn't tell us that. But at the same time, I thought it was cool that they showed Tony getting his happily ever after, but he's still Tony. So he has to fix the problem. So he does, but then you see it on his face that he's like, well, do I help out or am I selfish to keep the life that I have? And then that's when Pepper reminds him, she's like, you're still you and you always want to fix everything. So it really, I don't think I know Captain America probably pushed that motivation to see if he could figure it out by meeting with him, but it was really Tony who decided, you know what, I'm going to. And so, Pepper just gave him the option of not that she said it, but she was like,
she gave him permission,
you
really.
You can time travel? Yeah, she gave him permission, but she pretty much was like, she left it for him to decide.
Yeah.
She wasn't going to fight him.
Yeah. I do appreciate that they threw in real world physics where they could, and they're actual, not just made up science fiction terms, but no, I'm not talking about the physics like I'm talking about Ant-Man. I'm just saying when Tony talks about why it wouldn't work, they didn't just pluck Star Trek words out of the air. He talks about the Planck scale and the Deutsch proposition. Those are both real world
Quantum
physical
physics
terms
and,
that
yeah.
have to do with time travel or the possibility of time travel. So, I mean, I'm glad that they did their research and
Well,
gave us
the
a
time
reason.
things were powered by dilithium
Somewhat.
crystals, so there's that.
Well, I love Star Trek just like I think most of us do, but we also know that Star Trek, like one of the things they love to do is just make up freaky words and say it's, future technology.
Well,
But
and
in
it's
this
just
and
case,
because
it's
they
it's
use
sci-fi right
actual science
Yeah.
words
Yeah.
from science doesn't
Yeah,
make how they
but this
applied
time they
them
used it.
actual
I'm
they
sure
applied
at some
them
point
well.
we will get into how fast and
truth.
loose they are with
Okay.
time travel.
Just because they said Planck doesn't make it science.
So
okay?
Planck scale is the smallest possible unit of measurement in physics.
Well, I know what it is. It's
Which-
just it doesn't make how they applied it true science just because they used a phrase
No.
that happens to be
No,
in
I didn't say
science.
it does. I didn't say that it made true, because we know time travel isn't possible. Otherwise, we would have already figured it out. I'm
Time
just
travel is
saying.
possible. We're moving
I don't know
1
about
second
that.
per
If it
second into the
is-
future.
Okay, we're not going to do a
If it's-
podcast on time travel being possible or
If
not.
it's
all right,
possible,
everybody,
we haven't unlocked it yet. But the
not
Planck
make
scale
me
does
go-
have to do with shrinking.
don't make me drop F-bombs all over everybody again, like we did 2 episodes ago. All right, let me go to the next topic. All right, and that is the time heist, which I also wrote down as kind of it's more of a memory heist because you go back to New York in 2012, you got Asgard in 2013, Morag and Vormir in 2014, and then you got the camp where Steve Rogers was. Camp Lay in 1970.
Nostalgia heist.
And, well, exactly. It's a nostalgia heist. But I mean, New York, you got Steve fighting
it's
his
fan
younger
service
self.
heist.
But the thing is
Depending
No,
on
I
who you
don't think it was
ask.
just
This-
fan service. Yeah.
well, but
Depending on who you ask.
But the goal was to go get the stones, and for them to get the stones,
Yeah, and it made
and
sense.
the only way they can remember it. Yeah, it made sense. It wasn't just bringing in Andrew Garfield, which was awesome, by the way, though, in No Way Home, or bringing in Tobey Maguire. That's pure fan service in essence, right there. I mean, it was completely
that
this
made
one.
sense too in that movie.
I mean, in this,
in
we got
relation
like
to that movie. That
well, I mean,
Yeah.
like with
Up there.
the Hulk going to Bleecker Street, and then he meets the Ancient One. They bring, but it all worked together for the story. I don't think it was necessarily as thrown in there as all that. And so I just kind of wanted to get, we'll start with Darren. It just the whole thing of all these different times and places and where they're going, and you see. Like the opening of Guardians of the Galaxy, because you see Chris Pratt,
From a different
Star-Lord
perspective,
dancing,
yeah.
from a different perspective,
Dancing with
and then War Machine
music.
punches him in the face. So, like,
Yeah.
I mean, how did you, what were your thoughts on that?
I mean, that was a very Back to the Future Part 2 kind of moment for me, where it's like you get to return to these moments that you knew from the previous movies, and if anybody is engaged enough with Endgame, it's because they've seen all the rest of the movies. So it was all these references are not lost on the core audience. So you get the kind of, I'm looking at it from around the corner and looking at myself doing the thing that I did, it was very surreal. There is a lot of fan service to it. I liked it. I liked it a lot. The fact that they have to go back to places that happen to be connected to the other movies from storytelling, that makes sense because they're taking it back to places that they've been before. Story-wise, but also because those characters had been there before and they know that the stones are there. That's the only way they know the stones are there, is because they were there and knew the stones were there in the past. So it made story sense, and it made in-universe sense. So I'll give it a pass if it hits both those points. So yay.
Nice. Michael?
Yeah, so the New York scene I thought was really cool because that one was, I would say, dragged out the longest. It was telling 3 different points, I guess, where it focused on Captain America, then it was Tony Stark and Ant-Man, and then it was the Hulk, right? So it was 3 different stories, but in the same, timeline and city and all that. I thought the Hulk scene was perfect the way it was, just the convincing the Ancient One that he needs the stone. I thought dragging out them trying to get the Tesseract made sense because that was where most of the Hydra agents were anyways. The Scepter was really easy, I thought, but I guess it was fine because, I don't know, when you
Well,
watch Avengers
it was
1,
a
I
great
mean, when did
callback.
Captain America? Yeah, it was a great callback. But when did Captain America meet these people? I mean, he just got to the helicarrier like a couple hours before that fight, or like a day before that fight. So, and like the fight in like the Battle of New York, you know what I mean? So I'm like, so when like Crossbones, acknowledges him and he acknowledges him back, I'm like, how does he know him? So I thought that was a little weird.
Presumably, he did know him by then.
Yeah,
presumably.
The Nebula and Rhodey scene was
for this
great.
episode,
That
presumably.
that was easy. The one thing that I was rewatching it, the thing that I thought was really weird was what was that thing that Rocket had that was able to get the ether out of Jane Foster that Asgard didn't have?
The ether
you know what
sucker.
I mean? Like where?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Odin's like, I don't know how to do this.
Standard
right?
issue.
Or the Dark
Standard
World, but
issue,
then Rocket's like, oh, I have this little thing
ether
that I
sucker.
made. So I thought that was just
you
a little.
You want to start
that scene,
nitpicking? I got a whole list of nitpicks.
No,
We'll get there.
I thought like Thor seeing his mom.
Advances in
that was great.
technology from the time ether was in Jane. I mean,
I guess so.
time
but
has happened.
Thor seeing his mom, that was definitely needed. I absolutely love that scene. It was something Thor needed to remotivate
that
him
was great.
to be. And then him being able to still carry the hammer, I think that really, woke him up and he's like, I'm not done. This isn't done.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Rocket sucking the ether out of Jane with that, whatever that thing was, I was like, that's plot armor in a way.
Well, that dovetails right into what
But
they
also
said.
ruined that moment with the mother with the eat a salad line.
That was a funny joke. That's a good joke. That I don't know. I didn't
funny,
think
but again, it's
funny.
still that whole
No.
reducing Thor to a joke, which I didn't like.
Yeah, Matthew, what
One
do you
more
think?
dig.
Yeah, I like the Time Heist. The Avengers' greatest hits. I think well, I mean, that's what it is. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It
like
is.
you go watch
Is
the
Thor
movie
the Dark
Bohemian
World the greatest-
Rhapsody. Well, you know what I mean. It's
Yeah,
you're
no, I know.
revisiting. It's a trip down memory lane. It's like if you go watch Bohemian Rhapsody, it just captures the best moments of Queen and how they make all their popular songs. That's what this Time Heist sequence is, minus the Camp Lee scene. I don't know if I'm saying that right. That was,
Lehigh, wasn't it?
Lehigh.
I guess that was kind of a callback to Iron Man 2 when he has those, resolving his daddy issue moments. But I like the New York scenes. I think there's a lot of funny jokes there with America's ass.
Yeah, I like that.
Somebody
That
had to
was
call
fun.
that out. I always think about that joke. That one's so
I was
funny.
thinking that too. I knew somebody would say it.
Loki escaping with the Tesseract was great setup for the Loki show. If you haven't seen that,
Wait, he goes directly from there to
Yep.
the TVA, doesn't he?
to the TVA. Yep.
That's
And
where he jumps to?
I don't think the Russo brothers intended for that to happen, but it's great that it tied together that way. Kind of serendipitous. I like the Asgard scene. I like Thor the Dark World a decent amount anyway, but I think that scene kind of elevates that movie in a different way, which I know we talk about in our household from time to time. I think New York drags on the longest, like Michael said. I think emotionally, I'm looking at the notes here. Emotionally, the biggest scene would either be when Tony goes back to 1970 to get a second Tesseract and he gets to finally have closure with his dad, like true closure, not just through a projector screen, or the Vormir scene between Natasha and Clint. I think those are both really high emotional moments, kind of peaks of the film, at least for the middle part. So,
Yeah. And those
I really
moments are
enjoyed both of
shorter
those
than
scenes.
the New York stuff.
yeah, and
Like
they
the-
still pack just as much of a punch.
Yeah.
I know that New York had to be long because they had explained time travel, which I know we're going to get to, but
And they had to deal with 3 stones in one place.
yeah, they had to deal with 3 instead of 1 and 1. So I like it overall. I think it's, again, a bit convenient for the plot. All the stones, again, are just MacGuffins, as Ben would have said if he were here. I mean, they're all just plot devices at this point to get everybody back. So, but it's a good sequence. It's a good start to Act 2, basically.
Does
Go ahead.
everyone?
The one thing I wanted to bring up, sorry, just real quick, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, is Michael. I had no idea. Michael showed me this clip from the Vormir. There's a whole other scene they shot completely where Thanos and a bunch of his soldiers show up and they're shooting Clint and shooting Natasha. Like it was all shot and ready. And then Natasha's like shot like 2 or 3 times, and she's, you pretty much know she's going to die, and she throws herself off to save Clint. Like I had no idea that scene even existed. If you guys haven't seen it, look it up on YouTube. But like I didn't even know. I mean, the one they chose for the movie, I think, was obviously the better one because they spent all that
More
time building up
selfless,
the
for
relationship.
more emotional. But
Yeah.
what I was about to
But-
ask is, does everyone think that it was the right choice that the Russo brothers had
I think the Soul
Natasha die
Stone
rather than Clint?
having a cost when all the others
Yes.
don't is I don't like that much at all. It was arbitrary to have the Soul Stone have this.
I think because the Soul Stone, I think the Soul Stone is arguably more powerful, or it can do more.
Really? I don't think so.
I'm not
I'll
sure.
agree to disagree on that one, but I disagree. I think all of them are
as powerful as who was sacrificed. I think it was. It was a choice that made sense given Clint and his family.
Yeah, but the fact that they had to spend much time,
that feels like very cold on it, but
they had to spend so much time
I think
later
that they made the right choice
to say,
I do think they made
it's not undoable. It's not undoable. Don't ask me again. Yeah. It's not undoable. It's not undoable. And Thor was right. He's like, we have the stones. We have the stones. We unsnapped everybody and we can't unsnap her. What?
Because she wasn't snapped. It's not an unsnap.
She didn't die in the snap.
Well, that doesn't change the fact that the stones couldn't undo it. It's just it was a plot point that had to happen.
Yeah. But I felt like it made sense the way they did it. The only thing, sometimes I wonder if it was right for them to kill Natasha. I mean, it is, definitely. But I also see Clint's point of view, why he thought he was the one who should die, because he does have a family, but he also has turned to, doing these awful things.
The dark side.
Right.
So
and I wonder with Oh, go ahead, Josh.
I do agree with the choice that the movie made, even though I hate seeing Black Widow.
Well, I'm just saying, the Soul Stone having a cost that is not undoable, and it's an ultimate price to pay, was entirely a story.
No, it's not undoable.
It was entirely a story point. It was something that literarily had to happen. It was not something that made sense in universe. It was something that made sense from a literary storytelling standpoint because somebody had to pay the ultimate cost. Tony,
you're right. My brain.
Tony's family didn't. The daughter, Morgan, didn't. But of all the people who technically should have been expendable, if you will, I know that's a hot take, but of all the characters that were introduced that could have been expendable, she would have been the one. But Tony wasn't willing to make that, but he's willing to let Natasha go or anybody else. Again, Soul Stone with a cost where none of the other stones had a cost. None of the other stones had a weird cost. Like that just made no sense. It was arbitrary. It
is a bit of a plot hole. I agree with you, Darren. I mean, aside from it being arbitrary, if you really think about it, I know we're about to get to the whole time travel mechanics topic, but I'm gonna prologue that with this is if Natasha truly did die and Steve goes back at the end of the film to return the Soul Stone, Natasha shouldn't have been dead and she should have just come back with him, because otherwise her death still causes an alternate timeline. If you really think about it.
I think that there's an alternate timeline no matter what, because our timeline, Steve was not, in the past. When he stays in the past, that creates a different timeline.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's right. But
which is weird because his alternate self shows up in
I would assume that he found some
sitting
way
on the bench. You're like, how you can't do that?
I assume he found some way to travel to other dimensions. He found a way to travel through the multiverse.
Two caps. So let's jump into the time for 40 years.
Right. Let's jump into the time travel component because yes, they do deviate from this, and we'll start off with.
This is one thing that I wish that they had. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say is basically the way they did the time travel. To me, it came off as like, well, you can't go back and change your past, and then that becomes your future, and whatever that whole thing was, and everybody's like, rattling off, and I was like, so really. To me, it's like you're creating alternate dimensions, not really timelines. I mean, honestly, that's really what it is. It's like you're creating other dimensions.
The same thing.
Yeah,
kind of the same thing.
Right, but I'm saying,
and that is the theory.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I do wish that they had. I wish that they had explained it better, because to this day, I still explain it to people who don't get it. Like my daughter got really upset with the end of this movie with Steve, staying in the past and living his life with Peggy, because she was like, so then he just sat through through the Korean War, and he sat through 9/11. But we don't know that. In his timeline, he might have been active, but it's a different timeline. In this timeline, he's not here.
Then how is he sitting on the bench
He could have traveled across. Well, we know that travel across the different timelines is possible because Doctor Strange does it in a couple of movies.
Well, if they could go sideways
from now, they can go from one dimension to another, and maybe he found a way.
Well, then why didn't they just grab the stones from a side, go sideways to get the stones instead of backwards to get the stones?
Because we didn't know how to yet.
Heather, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's a lot with the time travel. You just have to suspend any sort of thoughts on that because, the idea of anything changing something in the past, not affecting, where they are coming from in the present, to me, and maybe that's just Star Trek training or whatever, but you can't do stuff like that without it having impacts, something is going to change. How and what, that can be storytelling choices, but
that's
the
why
fact
I wish
that none of the people in the present are affected by any of these changes in the past kind of, I had to all right, that's the way they're telling this story.
According to, again, I know that we don't want to talk about physics in a superhero movie, but according to the actual theories of quantum physics related to time travel, this is how time travel would work. Back to the Future really is bullshit. And people still, Back to the Future is a great movie and it makes a lot of sense to us. But according to theorists who are thinking about time travel, they say that it's impossible. That's not how time travel works. And that this is far more likely the way time travel actually works. But I've never traveled through time, so I don't know.
Again, I can't call it time travel anymore. I think that's where that line, where I draw that line. To me, it's not time travel, it's dimensional travel.
Yeah, Michael, what do you think?
So I think there's a distinct difference
about the time travel.
Yeah, just the whole concept and the way they presented it in the movie.
I think it's. I don't know. I really don't because this is quantum time travel over just normal
movie
time travel,
regular time travel.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at this way. This is a time travel movie, and then let's look at X-Men: Days of Future Past. That's also a time travel movie. Why is it? Those are both Marvel movies. Why is it that?
Those aren't
Wolverine,
connected, though.
Yeah, but why is it different I don't know. I guess then we could say in the multiverse everything's different. I don't know, but it's every other movie we've ever seen. It's always whatever you change, whether you step on a butterfly or not, the future is always going to be different. So why did Endgame all of a sudden change this? And I always wondered that. And I just kind of, when I watch it now, I just kind of just go, okay, it's just for the story. That's just how I feel. I'm just okay, it makes sense enough for me. It's like Jurassic Park. Their science totally makes sense to bring back dinosaurs. Cool.
Well, I think it was really to give Josh some physics wood is really what this was. So because Josh was like, oh my God, the physics are correct. I'm totally nutting right now.
No, the physics aren't. I mean, I'm not saying that the physics are correct because we don't know time travel, but the actual theories right now, this movie matches Back to the Future and those types of things where they affect the future, according to actual theorists who don't know any more than I do, really. Well, they know more than I do, but they haven't traveled through time any more than I have. Their theory is that this is how it works. We can't change our present by changing the past. We can make another.
The two things I wanted to bring up that I thought was the topic before this. We were talking about the time going to the other, New York 2012, revisiting all these places we've already seen, as well as the time travel. I don't know how. I know this is obviously going to play in Avengers Doomsday, but I'm kind of wondering. I don't know if anybody wants to take a stab at how, because I think because it's the Russo brothers again doing Avengers Doomsday. And this is a big thing now that we have the multiverse, especially because now you don't have to take the time to explain time travel because you can just use the multiverse, hopping around. So, but I'm wondering, I don't know if anybody wants to give a thought out there in terms of how it's going to be used in Doomsday, or will it be whatever. Go ahead, Darren.
I'll say it. I think Doomsday is going to be the Kelvin timeline of the Marvel universe. I don't think Tony Stark as Doom has any relationship directly with the timelines or past, present, or future of anything we've seen in the Marvel universe so far. That's
okay.
I think that character doesn't, but I think through the mechanizations of the multiverse and so on and so forth, and all the stuff that's brought up by the What If cartoon and all this type of stuff, is they will pull into the timeline of whatever the movie's timeline is going to be. They will pull in characters from timelines and situations that we are familiar with in the MCU. But I don't think the Doom that we're going to see has any relationship with any timeline we've seen so far.
Got it.
That's
Well,
my
they
opinion.
said
That's
the rumor at the rumor at the San Diego Comic-Con was that they showed a trailer where Susan Storm and Reed Richards, they know this Doctor Doom, or at least they know of a Doctor Doom, but maybe they'll be shocked that it's Tony Stark as Doctor
different
Doom.
guy,
It's a
maybe,
variant.
yeah.
It has some precedence in the comics. I believe there are at least 2 storylines where there was one that he's a variant from the multiverse, a different version of Tony Stark, and I'm not sure if that's true. And then the other one that I've heard is that Victor Von Doom had facial surgery, facial reconstruction surgery to look like Tony Stark. Though I
That
don't
would
know
be
why.
awful.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah,
that
I
is
wouldn't like that at all.
That would be
friggin'
terrible.
cheesy.
That would
That
be
would
like,
I'm
that would
not
be
saying
like
I have no
Palpatine
idea.
presenting
Nicolas
himself
Cage.
as Snoke. And being
I
like,
didn't come
I
up
was
with it.
just Snoke the whole time, you know? This is...
I'm not saying what they should do. I'm not saying what they're going to do. I don't know. I'm
If
not
we're going to
the one
say
who's
anything, we
making the
should say
movies.
what they should do.
I'm just saying that this is what I've heard from comics based on what I know about the comics, and I could even be wrong about that. I will say this, it's probably stupid. I love the fact that Robert Downey Jr. is going to be in Doomsday, but there's still a part of my brain that kind of thinks that Robert Downey Jr. was looking at the mediocre ratings of the movies that came out after Endgame, and then they offered him the part, and he goes, "You cannot live with your own failure." Where did that bring you? Back to me.
Correct. Well done. So before we wrap up this part 1, I kind of want to open it up. And what topics did we potentially miss that you guys made your notes on? I don't want to miss out on your insightfulness on the physics of the MCU.
Can I bring
or
it?
whatever
Can I
else.
talk about some nitpicks? I have a couple nitpicks with all
We
the
have time
tech.
for
No, you
nitpicks
can't.
in the first
You can't.
episode,
If you get to say your first nitpick, and if it's stupid, we're voting you off the island. Go ahead.
Okay. With all the tech experience available, Stark, Banner, and Rocket, how did none of them foresee that Nebula's network components would step on each other when they time traveled? How did nobody even consider the possibility of that? That blows my mind.
Plot
Yeah,
armor.
plot
time
armor.
machine.
It had to happen, so it did happen. Okay.
maybe.
Hashtag
Listen,
plot
I mean,
armor.
we are
That's-
still like they do
Hashtag
say
agency.
but
And the
don't
other
forget
thing was,
that
if the
they haven't
Pym-
done time travel yet. This is brand new to them. So
No, I know. If the Pym particles are so scarce for these time jumps,
Yeah, why
Okay.
didn't they go get those first?
well,
Plot armor.
no. Here's the thing: how does if it's so scarce, how does Ant-Man have enough particles to power his shrinking and growing during the final battle? He grows and
Plot
shrinks
armor.
12 million times during that
Yeah.
battle.
Well,
Well,
no, by
and
that
it was
by,
shown
an
that one
unlimited
by,
amount.
by,
It
shrink
was
by
a
the time of
one
the final
dose.
battle,
Plot
they had
armor.
gotten more.
No.
Yeah.
Hank Pym was brought back. Hank
Yeah,
Pym
but
was brought
what-
back, and
Did he
Steve
have to
also
go to Pym and go get some more? No, he was under rubble, and then he
Maybe.
started the battle. So
No,
Yeah.
but Steve
Yeah,
Rogers
no
only
time.
went back to
No time.
1970.
Yeah, he
and
did bring
grabbed some of them.
several.
Yeah.
He did bring back
Yeah.
several of those vials. No, I
Plot
thought.
armor.
okay,
no,
I'll give you that one. Yeah. He brought.
But why didn't
more
they do
from
that
the
first?
past.
That way, then they wouldn't have to worry about the whole.
What about those little
you get
silver
one round
thing
trip and
discs
that's
that he
it.
has that make
The
him grow
silver?
and shrink? Maybe he
the,
just
the
used those
discs
the whole
that
time.
grow and shrink.
Yeah.
yeah.
Called
I don't
plot
think
No,
he
armor.
used
I
any
want to
of
know
those.
how. I mean, if we're talking about nitpicking, I want to know how Laura's cell phone works. I mean, Clint
Yes,
hasn't
I
been
said that
paying her
too.
cell phone
Michael
bill
said
for
the
5
same
years.
thing, and I
But then here's the thing: no one was around. Like Steve Jobs or whoever wasn't around to make another cell phone, so they couldn't make iPhone 25.
Yeah,
yet.
how
Maybe
was her
cell
plan
phones
still
wouldn't
active?
have progressed.
So
But her
T-Mobile,
plan would have been deactivated.
T-Mobile or Verizon really stepping up with that plot armor.
Hey, maybe Clint kept that plan active because of grief. Come on.
Yeah,
Grief. Yeah, that had to have
That's
been
what
it. That had to have been
Clint
it.
is the unsung hero of the Marvel
But he
Cinematic
keeps saying
Universe
he
because
has
he
no
never
hope.
could let
Don't
go.
give me hope, but he gives himself hope by
Yeah,
keeping
but
the
he
plan
has
That's
no
alive.
why I
'Cause he was
wonder
keeping
why
her cell
Captain
phone service.
why
Hang on.
Captain Marvel
Go ahead.
didn't swoop in for more of these like crisis moments, but that's that's its own thing.
And I actually also wonder if how bad infrastructure was affected, because how did Scott Lang get from San Francisco to New York in no time at all. I would assume he flew there, but were airplanes like flying just as regularly after the snap?
Well, what if he shrank and then flew
At
on
5 years,
Anthony,
they'd probably.
or second Antony?
I was wondering why he left the
How long did
storage
it take an hour to
facility.
get across America?
No, why did he leave the storage facility without the van and then come back and get the van in order to go to the Avengers compound? It's like he left with a wagon and then came back to get the van and then went. It's like
yeah, did he drive? And I guess he drove across the United States.
It was the emotional image of pulling that wagon. That's all that was for. It was the emotional
he shrunk
image.
The van.
No, he also didn't know what
he
had
could have
happened.
had the van in his
he didn't
pocket
know what
that
had
whole
happened.
time.
Wait, they should have shrunk the gauntlet and put it in his pocket while that whole battle was going on. Thanos never would have found
nobody would have found it. Just shrink it.
Hang on. For those of you listening, we will be having an online store, and our first shirt is just going to say #plot armor, and you'll be able to buy those in another week or two.
I thought it was going to say
point out my
agree to disagree.
Agree to
Here's
disagree.
my
No,
nitpick.
it's going to say MCU physics rock is what it's going to say.
Here's my nitpick. Natasha can grow her hair out, but Captain America can still cut his hair. Who's cutting their hair? Plot armor.
Why does Steve choose to shave off his beard at the beginning of the movie? Shouldn't have been 5 years later. They could have just why did he shave his beard right then? 23 days after, why that? Why not just have his beard out and then 5 years later he doesn't have the beard anymore?
Speaking of beards, if Thor can magically braid his beard during the final battle, why can't he shed the pounds with the magic lightning?
Yeah.
Are you fat shaming Fat
Hang
Thor?
on. Nobody talk. All right. This was supposed to be open discussion and not like nitpicking the shit out of
you said
the most.
We're open.
I said what do
you
you
wanted
guys
to round out part one? I know.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so legitimately, other than did I say nitpick? I'll have to.
No,
whatever.
No, you didn't.
Anyway,
Darren said he had nitpicked.
Oh yeah, Darren said he had nitpick. It's all Darren's fault. So
I derailed.
Does anybody have? So this was supposed to be an open discussion. Were there any points, legitimate points, that we missed that we needed to talk about before we wrap this up?
I wanted to chime in on the time travel. I think it's stupid. I think these rules are dumb.
They broke them left, right,
Tell
and
us how you really feel.
I think it's a terrible time travel mechanic for the sake of this plot, #plot armor. Because I don't know, like Darren just said, they break left, right, and center. It's just a hot mess, and I think the way the Back to the Future does it, and even the way Days of Future Past did it, was so much better and so much cleaner. We just spent the last 10 minutes nitpicking, what about this and what about this? It's like you could do that for hours about these rules of time travel. Whereas if you look at Back to the Future and you look at Days of Future Past, those rules of time travel are pretty cut and dry, kind of clear. Time travel is always a little fuzzy, but it's like this. The Russo brothers wrote this time travel to be different, and they even make fun of Back to the Future in this movie because they wanted to subvert expectations to serve their movie better. I think this version of time travel is weak, and I don't know. I find it to be frustrating, especially when you go watch Loki, and then it's just a standard, or the sacred timeline is what they call it. And that all just gets derailed anyway. And it's like, well, what the hell's the point of this little infinite loop that we have? I don't know.
I agree.
I think it's silly.
I mean, that's why I said I wish that they had explained it better. But I also, still also.
And by explain it better, you mean be more consistent? Is that what you mean by explain it better?
Well, aside from that, just their explanation when Hulk is saying, you can't change. If you go into the past, that becomes your future. And now you can't change.
Yeah, there was one throwaway line that's like.
Yeah, they didn't
and then they just kept going. So
they didn't explain it enough. But as I said before, according to scientists who theorize about time travel, this is the way it would work if time travel were real. I don't know. As the movie goes, I do like the fact that they go Back to the Future is much easier to understand. It's much easier to follow, but they didn't want to do the same thing as Back to the Future.
Yeah, because it before. Well, yeah, and they want to be different just to be different. So anyway, we could wrap it up. I just wanted to throw that out there. That I think these time travel rules are so dumb.
So
I find it kind of strange that Valkyrie was disgusted by Thor being drunk at his failure, and depressed about his failure when she did exactly the same thing in Thor Ragnarok.
Now who derailed the conversation,
Projecting.
Bob?
Yeah.
Huh?
Hashtag
go ahead.
projecting. Yeah, let's now go on the mental health of every character in the MCU. No, let's not.
There we go.
So,
there we go.
Part one. So finishing part one of our Endgame discussion, right? So kind of, you guys we'll start with Darren. Is obviously what you thought about it. Favorite character, favorite moment. Just kind of wrap it up and your summary of Endgame up until what we've talked about, which is basically the whole time heist thing, because we're kind of leaving it there in the middle of that, and we'll talk about the rest of the movie when we come back next week.
For as much as I'll rail on the inconsistencies of the time travel, I still love this movie. Up to even with all of its foibles and stuff where you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. It's not meant to make sense. It's supposed to be emotional beats that resonate. Ant-Man wasn't in the van when he left the warehouse because pulling that wagon through that desolate neighborhood was the whole point of that scene. That was the emotional oomph of that scene. If he were driving the van, it wouldn't have had the same effect. And that's why they did it. And you could say that same exact, the emotional vibe of the scene was more important than the consistency that either preceded it or followed it. And you could say that about any part of this movie. And for those emotional beats, love it. Cannot say anything bad about it. It had every feel in the box, every bit of, and I loved it for it. And so, yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Michael?
I think this is a great film for you to shut off your brain and watch. I feel like a lot of people kind of lose that. I know we like to analyze superhero movies nowadays on like what it connects and what it brings and where it's going to go after. But it's like, sometimes it's like, now can't we just watch it and just sit down and enjoy it for what it is, what story it gives us, And I feel like people seem to lose sight of that now. It's why, movies aren't doing too well nowadays, because everyone needs to point out every little thing that they can think of and where it's connecting. And I don't know. So I think it's a great film. And Darren, to go back on the whole like why Ant-Man didn't take the van, I just had an idea. It was maybe because everyone who was still alive siphoned everyone's gas out of their cars just to keep their car going. You know what I mean? I don't know.
So he found some later.
Yeah. We also don't know that he had to go back for it, because it could have been shrunk to a Hot Wheels size and in his pocket.
But I think it's a
I'm sure it needed a jump too. It's been in storage for 5 years. Right?
Yeah, he probably
he didn't have time. Yeah. He didn't have time. He wanted to go see gas.
So it's a great film. I think a lot of the characters got the ending that I expected, and then a lot of them got endings that I didn't expect, but I liked where it went.
Yeah. I'll give my take. We'll go to Heather after that. I thought Endgame was great. Again, just kind of looking at the movie up until what we've talked about today, which is, all the heist stuff. I know you guys mentioned it, and it's like, yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I can see, obviously you could be like, oh, it's just, nostalgia bait for people. But I felt like it really fed more into the storyline rather than, like the thing I compare it to is No Way Home. It's just Ned going, and then suddenly, boom, Tobey Maguire, and it's awesome, but it didn't necessarily move the plot. I mean, he could have gotten help from, other stuff, and here it actually moves the plot, and I think that again, we've always talked about, especially in phase 2 and here into phase 3, it's, a lot of the character growth and that type of thing. And I think, confronting either their past selves or just reliving some past events. I mean, obviously Natasha, we talked about throwing, basically sacrificing herself to get the soul stone. It brings a lot of full circle and kind of, I think, recharges a few of the characters like we talked about with Thor. But I thought, I think Endgame is awesome. I know a few of you guys are like, you like Infinity War better, but I think Endgame is pretty awesome, especially in terms of its culmination of everything. Heather?
Up until this point in the movie, I really did like all the callbacks to the prior event, and that kind of that different perspective look at these events when they are jumping back to go reclaim the stones. And so I enjoyed that. I enjoyed, when they got to have those introspective, perspectives of themselves, and when you get to see like other characters through a different character's eyes that was not part of that original scene, like the Star-Lord and Nebula and Rhodey. Yeah.
Nebula.
So, but yeah, I think I really like that take on it. And yeah, the time travel stuff, again, you just have to at some point, like, well, I'm just going to enjoy the movie because this stuff doesn't make sense. But, no, I think I like that it was kind of constantly moving. Yeah, and I that's the movie as a whole, but like I didn't feel like any part of this movie dragged out or was diminished in any way. I thought it was like a steadily moving story. And so yeah, I was like invested, 100% through the whole 3 hours, I think they did a good job of pacing it, of throwing in the emotional, conflict. And I think my only thing would be wishing that we saw a little more of that journey over the 5 years of the surviving Avengers, of how they got from, where they were at the end of Infinity War and after the 22 days up to the 5 years later point, like some of that change.
Yeah. Matthew?
Up until this point in the movie, I do like this movie, despite my qualms with the time travel mechanics.
It's
just not your favorite.
No, it is. It's in my top 10 for sure.
Line.
It's not my line.
Yeah, that's Josh's line. Don't steal Josh's lines.
No, I do enjoy this movie. Like Michael said, it's a movie where you can go and turn your brain off. You have to accept the rules that they've put into place, whether they make sense or not, to serve the story.
Them or not.
Or whether they break them or not. I think there are a lot of emotional payoffs, even up until the halfway point of the movie, where that each character is going to get their emotional arc and conclude it, and at least for the original 6 anyway, right? And one of them you see die like halfway through because Natasha dies, and that there's high stakes with this movie. So I think, despite my, I guess, disagreements with the pacing of the front half of this movie up until the time heist, I do like it. I think that it's good setup for the final battle, which we know is coming, right? They've already shown Thanos in his prime at this point when they do the time heist and Nebula gets captured. So something big's going to come. And I really do like the overall narrative of this, despite a couple of complaints that can be ignored for the most part. So that's where I sit for at least the front half of the movie.
Josh?
Well, I love this movie, as you can probably tell, despite all of the nitpicks that I was able to come up with, because it's fun. I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, but I do love this movie. But as I said before, and I agree with Heather on this, I was finding myself very, very interested in learning more about the world, during these dark times, and I would have liked to see more of it. I was really pulled in that first scene with Steve at the support group talking to, well, I think it was Anthony Russo, the guy who went on the date. It was one of the Russo brothers. I think it was Anthony, but I'm not sure. And I liked that scene. And then the very second scene is Scott coming out of the quantum's realm and starting the whole time travel thing. So, like, I can understand why we're not going to have more stuff in that time, because this movie is already 3 hours, over 3 hours. But another series would work for me with very little action. And I sound like a softie saying that, but I find that interesting. But I still love this movie and everything about it. Even the first half, I'm okay with how introspective it is.
Can I just make one observation to Josh's point and Heather's point about I'm curious about what happened after the snap and how humanity dealt with it. I think
they do discuss some of it
a little bit, but shows. I think one of the main reasons why we're drawn to wanting to know more is because Thanos specifically says, "I'm doing this. I'm removing half of humanity." So that the other half lives better, has more resources. Now,
and they don't.
No. The question is unanswered. Did it work? Like, is that the net result on Earth?
It was a dumb.
Is everybody just better
his
off?
His plan is flawed from the very beginning. It's something that we didn't even talk about in Infinity War. How much his plan is flawed. Based on
just
our
a selfish.
We can bring that up in part 2
sure,
next week.
Yeah, but I mean.
I'm just saying the curiosity could stem from wanting to know whether his reasoning
I think it's the emotional
on a macro scale on Earth.
It's the emotional part of it.
It didn't hit me until you're saying that. So you're right. Did his plan work? So I hear that now. It wasn't an original thought as I was, I was just curious about the people and the emotion and the drama.
Yeah, me too.
I would
they're
like
obviously
to see
where it goes.
Not happy how, how has this been for 5 years? So.
Yeah. So anyway.
But yeah, that is a good point. Yeah.
We can discuss this more next week, but I do want to thank everyone for being here. Matthew, Michael, Heather, Bob, Darren, and myself, because I'm a narcissist. I'm not a narcissist.
Thank you,
that's
Josh.
Okay. I want to thank the audience for putting up with us and for tuning in. If you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe and tune in next week for the rest of this show. Make tomorrow better than yesterday.